A good morning to you, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing well this morning. I've got a full cup of coffee and I'm bright-eyed and ready to go.
Great. So, as one of the earliest crypto apprentices, I'm interested in your development of your time in the real world. So, how did it all begin for you?
So, back in the days when the real world had a very small amount of people, I actually, around the same time, I had been just introduced to the content of the Tate brothers, various podcasts and interviews, and I started thinking about this HU, or the real world thing. And it started with my friend showing me the signals chat of Adam and Michael and how they were making their calls. And he basically said, "You need to get your ass in here. You're losing out on making money." This was at the height of the bull run where everybody was in full mania. Uh, you couldn't take 5 steps without people throwing wads of cash at the crypto markets. Everybody was talking about Bitcoin around the bar tables. It was just absolutely absurd. So I started uh, stepping into the real world with a greedy intention. I was greedy and I was selfish because I looked at it and said, okay, $50 a month, yeah, that's worth some signals to me. Let's make some money. And I got in there. So that's kind of how I discovered it and how I stepped in.
Mhm. And what was your life like at the time?
So admittedly, I was not in the best of places. And I've come to realize that now after several months of introspection, development, reflection, uh, all those sorts of things. Where I was at before was I was in a concrete box of an apartment. Like it was the most stereotypical engineered cutout box, concrete walls, concrete ceiling. It was a depressing place to be in. And that's where I was. I was kind of isolated in that place where I didn't have too many friends calling in. This was in the height of the pandemic, and so everybody was locked down. Everybody was afraid. Nobody wanted to meet up. So I had very few friends that were reaching out and wanting to hang out. So I was not in a good place mentally or physically, and I've only come to realize that later on. But I was unemployed. I was earning maybe 12 to 1500 a month Canadian. And that was partly substantiated with employment insurance. So brokey money, essentially, that the government gives you for free. And yeah, I was taking that money and I was trying to throw it at the crypto markets with the stubborn intention of I can get rich by clicking buttons. So that's
Mhm.
kind of where I was at.
Okay. And then you join the real world, known as Hostage University at the time. You said you first went into the crypto campus, correct? You didn't see any of the other campuses.
I had already had a bit of an interest in cryptocurrency. I was researching into the space. Now, I was one of those. I was one of those guys. And this is a secret that I have not told anybody. I was one of those guys that bought into the entire narrative of XRP. Ripple this, Ripple that, XRP this, XRP that, 10,000 when, all that sort of stuff. I was pursuing the narratives and I was making the key mistake that a lot of beginners do where they chase the news. They look for the articles, they're looking for the narrative. And while that's important to consider on the wider stage of things, as Professor Adam will say, news doesn't matter, it's all in the data. And so I was a news chaser. I was a XRP army go getter. I believed in the 15,000 per token take over the global economy sort of thing. I was down the rabbit hole. That's kind of where I was when I first before then. So I went into the cryptocurrency campus because it was the most familiar. Um, Stocks I have very little experience in. Copywriting looked interesting to me, but at the time, I didn't make the time and effort to actually learn the material and get into it. So I focused and I stayed in my comfort zone. I focused on what was familiar. And from there, well, it's been a very interesting journey to see not only the progression that I made with learning the material there, but also the progression in the way that the material has been given out and displayed and created and curated by the professors. Like I've seen the evolution of a lot of the lesson material, and it's been a privilege to actually walk through that with them.
Mhm.
So,
Okay, so since we're doing a confessional here, I was also a believer in XRP to the point where I even done some leveraged longs into it.
oh boy.
So yeah, that is very relatable from my end as well. And that was before I joined the real world. If I had been in the real world, the professors would, like, everyone who was asking about XRP, they were saying it's not going to go anywhere. Like they were warning you against it. But because of all the biases out there, you just confirmation bias. You're looking for the articles, everything that supports it. It seems like there's no way this doesn't work out. But again, I didn't have that rational mind because I as well was not in the real world at the time.
Well, and it's a very easy mistake to make when you first get in there, right? Where you've done all this research and you've invested so much time and effort and energy into pursuing these leads, and then this random guy on the internet that drives supercars looks at you and says, "No, you idiot, don't do that." And you're like, "Well, F you, man. I want to do this." And then you're proven wrong. Like it's been very it's humbling. It's very humbling. And if you go in with that kind of mentality, like that was the mentality I approached it with. For anybody familiar with Socrates, the only thing I knew about crypto is that I knew nothing. And I went into HU with that kind of mentality. It was very difficult because, again, like you, I invested a lot of time and energy and 20x longs into XRP, and yeah, it was a rocky road at the beginning for sure. So,
Right. Okay, so how different was the material for you in the real world compared to what's out there on the internet?
So that's a very interesting observation, because back when I first joined the campus, well, the overall campus. So this was the entirety of the membership was only at about 4,400 members. So there was a much more like this is the classic situation with any sort of business or community growing exponentially, is that as you expand, it's more difficult to have the same kind of interaction and outreach. Back at the time that I joined, there was a little bit more of a personal flavor to it, just because you were able to kind of converse with the professors more directly. But what I was finding was that a lot of the sharp individuals who have gone quiet since, or have found success since their joining, they were the ones talking, and there was a lot of well-formulated questions, kind of like a small university class of like only about 20 students and a professor. It has such a different feel in a small classroom than it does in a large amphitheater with 4,500 students and one professor, right? But that's been a very fun challenge for we as the apprentices and professors to actually engage with, because it's still finding that balance of how do we give that personal touch in addition to the lesson material. So what we see now is a much more refined version and a much more refined product, which I think they've done a phenomenal job. It's night and day difference from what we started out with, but the information quality is the same. That has been the consistent baseline of the entirety of this campus that I've been in. And I can only say good things about the crypto campus because I know it the most. But I've spoken with some of the other apprentices in other campuses, and they say the same thing. The baseline consistency of that information and quality of information and lesson material has been a founding aspect of HU, or the real world, since its inception. That would be the best way that I can describe it.
But how different is that material compared to what's out there on the internet?
So the biggest point of comparison that I can give for educational material, especially in the crypto campus, this is probably where it's the most prevalent. Um, in the crypto campus, the information that the professors are giving is focused and curated specifically for educational purposes, for you to understand the foundational principles of investing and trading and building your strategies. Whereas I find with a lot of the additional research and stuff that I've done outside of the real world, it's there is a lot of hype, there is a lot of baiting in, there's a lot of um, selfish pump and dump schemes. I mean, we've seen it with various influencers where they've hyped up a certain coin, and well, if you take in their content, if you're a fan or a viewer, there's a very clear distinction. But if you're a fan of one of these influencers, you're placing your trust in somebody you don't actually know. You're placing your trust in a persona, and when they hype up these coins, or if they're talking about these sorts of things, one of the primary questions that I learned from the real world, I believe it was Adam that forced me to really think on this question, is why are they hyping this up and why are they doing it now? Though, if you're an influencer in the space and you're trying to set up these pump and dumps so that you can make your money and sell out while other people are buying, you're not going to make your audience ask that question. And I've had Adam back in the day. I've seen him have these discussions, and they're very direct. Where he looked at them and he said, "Why are they doing it now? Have you asked that question? Have you confronted your list of biases? Have you confronted all sorts of the variables?" So the fact that there is a very authentic and genuine intention for helping you learn and navigate the marketplace and the overall internet space for crypto, whereas a lot of the stuff outside of it I find is very predatory in nature and unreliable. So that would be the biggest comparison that I have between the information in the real world and what is out there on the internet.
Mhm. Now, going on to the community aspect, what kind of an effect did the community have on you?
Oh boy, I hope you're ready to buckle in, because this is probably the biggest impact that the real world has had on me. Um, so before I've always been a bit of a dreamer. I've always had these visions and these dreams of grandiose adventure and ambition. I love a good underdog story. That's probably my biggest enjoyment when it comes to stories and other sorts of things. And so before, I didn't really have a lot of friendships that were focused on ambition and purpose. There was a lot of status quo in friendships and relationships that I had, where I wanted to talk about more. I wanted to talk about deeper aspects in life. I wanted to talk about how do we make money. I mean, that right there has become one of my most favorite conversations to have with my newfound friends that I've found both in the real world and now outside with men with similar purposes and ambition. So if you're like me, when you first start out, I lived in the metaverse. I lived on the internet. Discord was my home turf. So when the real world started on Discord, I was like, yeah, no, I'm familiar with this. I'm comfortable. I know all the ins and outs. Like this is home. Um, it was a very dorky situation, as Top G might call it. So I lived in the metaverse and I pursued all these sorts of things, but I was stuck in a place where I didn't have any momentum. And by stepping into the community of the real world, I was introduced to that. All of a sudden, you're put in a place with a bunch of guys who, like, for the rest of the students, they might not be as far along as the professors, but what the underlying constant that I found with a lot of these young men was we want more in life. And the only question that we're trying to figure out is how do we get there? If you go from having very little to no interaction of that caliber to all of a sudden just reading chats of guys that are talking about, hey, I managed to do this today, or I made my first successful trade. That right there is probably my favorite win to see in the wins channel, is when a guy steps in and says, this was my strategy. This is what I did. I wanted to pull out, or I wanted to go, balls to the wall, but I stuck to my system and I made $50. That right there is a freaking phenomenal win. And the fact that the guys actually celebrate that kind of stuff, like, hey, you have a strategy, you stuck to it. Like you go from a place of no positive influence to a lot of positive influence. And then it becomes about, it becomes a community of guys that are wanting to see you succeed and wanting to help you get there, but you have to do the work. Right. And that's a very important thing, is that they're empowering you to do the work in order to get to where you want. So when you're surrounded by that kind of ambition and that purpose, I mean, that's part of the reason why I completely uprooted from my former living situation. I mean, there were personal factors at play there as well, but that was one of the primary catalysts for me actually getting momentum to start moving in the trajectory that I'm headed now.
Mm-hmm. I'd like you to go a bit more in depth into what you just said. How did the Wins channel affect you when you were first starting out?
Well, what I can say is when I first started out, I was, I guess the best way to describe it was I was a little jealous. I will admit, I was jealous seeing those green numbers go up. And it forced me to actually confront the mentality that I was approaching the limited trading that I was doing, because I saw these guys that were getting regular wins, and I was getting small, like little penny wins, a few dollars here, a few dollars there. And I will fully admit there were trades that I was making that were primarily greed driven. I had no strategy. I had no discipline on the matter. It was just I want the money. I want the money. I want the money. And I got confronted with that sort of mentality because, and I've actually shared this story with a few students when we had a little bit of a voice chat going on for a brief time. And I was able to talk about this story. This to me is, it's not a dollar amount win, but this was definitely a personal obstacle that was overcome. And I had a trade where I cranked the leverage up to a stupid amount, like to the point where I was full on chimpanzee brain. And I think it was a 20x on a $300 trade. And I watched the profit go up. I made $1,500 in 30 seconds. And I lost $1,500 in the next 30 seconds. And I had to stop right there, and I had to look at it, and I said, close the exchange, open up the Discord, go back through the lesson material. And I forced myself, I think I was up for probably about 6 hours going through the investing philosophy videos again, because I had to confront that very ugly side of myself that came up that I had never seen before. Like it made me physically nauseous that I was willing to throw that money at that and just absolutely lose all sight and focus. So when I see the Wins channel, what I was seeing before was, oh, he's making money and I'm not. But now when I see the Wins channel, what I see is he's developed a strategy. And we had to implement a rule. Like this was before I was an apprentice, and it shifted after I became an apprentice too. But that was the initial transformation from how I view the channel. It was, he's making money and I'm not. That pisses me off. To, he developed a strategy. How can I get to that point? And I'd like to throw some credit to where it's due. The other apprentice, Bear, was one of the primary figures that actually I was asking that question about. how can I get to his level? And so I had to force myself to go through the content again and start really confronting my mentality and my foundational principles as an investor. Now, after I became an apprentice, the Wins channel was a moderating nightmare. So there were a lot of over leveraged wins that were being posted, and that's not what we were wanting to encourage. So that's why the rule was implemented of, I believe it's no more than 5x leverage allowed, because beyond 5x, you're gambling. And most people don't even know what they're doing with 2x leverage. So kind of a, yeah, moderating nightmare is what it turned into. But I'm still inspired by guys who have strategies and are earning profits and earning potentially their income from clicking buttons and reading the markets for what they are. So that's kind of what the Wins channel is for me.
Mm-hmm. That was a profound answer. I like that. Now, moving on to, what does your average day look like now versus before you joined the real world?
So before I joined the real world, I was sleeping until 3 in the afternoon. I was staying up until 5 in the morning. I was living on YouTube, Discord, all that sort of stuff. I was doing basically F all. I was a brokey through and through. Now what my day looks like, it sort of depends on the week you catch me in. Part of the reason why I stepped out here was I looked at my cash flow situation. I did not have a whole lot of savings or a stockpile of capital to look at stepping into a business. I was kind of on the precipice where I wasn't in a particular place where I could make a significant risk and step out into more entrepreneurial work. So what I did was I default, and I don't want to paint this in a bad light, because this is the strategy that's actually helped me get to where I am now. And it was thanks to a little bit of networking and just tapping into the friends and contacts that were positive influences for me. I moved to a different town, and I stepped into a new job as a heavy equipment operator. Just went straight into labor, and I've been trading time for money. But it's a very important move to make when you look at your chessboard, and if that's the best move that you can make in that position, then you need to make it. You need to make it quick. So that was my typical day now on a shift week. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I go to work. I'm on site for 6:30, start at 7, and work for 12 hours straight. So my work days are 14 hours long for 7 days straight. And then on my off week, which is 7 days, that's where the real work begins. I'm keeping tabs on the real world. I'm constantly looking at the investment updates. I'm not too active in the chats anymore, because I've been investing into my networking, my communication skills, going to the gym, working out, investing into my body, investing so that I can increase my energy stockpile that I can dedicate to the day. And it's allowed me to have the time to develop these important friendships, but also start working with my father in the family business that he's been working on for the last 20 years, really. And so I've been able to actually get into a position where I'm confident enough to step into that and start working hand in hand with my father on that.
Yeah. You say confident enough. So you're saying your circumstances changed because of the real world. You got more confidence, which then allowed you to, work with your father. Did I understand it correctly? And is there more to add to that?
Well, yeah, so I can very easily delve into that, and it comes down to the relationship I was able to build with Professor Adam, and I say Adam specifically because he's the one that I have the most back and forth with, and I used to be terrified to ask questions in the real world when I first joined, because the constant thought that I had was, I don't want to waste their time. with a bad question? Has the question been answered? So, and this is the unique thing I find with the real world, is that there are many more lessons and nuanced lessons in between the lines. Like, yeah, I'm in the crypto campus to learn about Bitcoin and Ethereum and talk about, Sharp ratios and the efficient frontier for investing. But what I've learned and what I've pulled is how to engage high net worth individuals. The second was how to formulate intelligent questions to get intelligent answers. And then the third was the importance of observation and learning. So, building off of that, do your research before you ask a question. Has this question already been answered? Because now you get into the game of reputation and networking, right? You want to talk about investing? It's been said that the question has been asked, what is your most precious asset? The answer is your time. So you want to maximize your time spent in, investing time into researching a question so that you can then ask a better question. Because that investment of time into formulating that question will get you a higher rate of return on your investment of time through the payout of information, right? This is so, wheeling back a little bit to my relationship with Adam. I was terrified to ask questions at first. Like, I remember where my fingers were almost shaking a little bit over the keyboard after I had written out a paragraph long question. And then I read it over probably about 6 or 7 times and was like, okay, is this good? Well, I think that's already been answered. That sounds stupid. Delete that, rephrase it. I spent an hour every time I asked a question in the Ask the Professors chat, every single time. And it paid off because the answers that I started to get were well formulated and they were well intended. They could see that the effort was put into crafting the question, but the respect for their time was also given by asking those better questions. Anybody can go, what coin, or when pump and dump, anybody asked that, and a lot of people ask that, and that's just it's disrespectful, I found. But that's the thing that I started to learn, was when you respect the time of these high net worth individuals, the payoff is so much larger than you could imagine. So through talking with Adam and through my fearful questioning period, that's kind of how I got onto the apprentice group, was by asking those questions. Then I started asking him, like, hey, do you have any research videos that you want summarized? Or, hey, I went and summarized this. Or, hey, I've decided to get a little bit tunnel visioned, and I went and archived the entire Discord server because I'm paranoid that it could collapse. Well, look what happened, right? Like it was just one of those things that occurred. But I was constantly asking him and talking with him about how can we improve the real world? How can we improve the community around us? And the feedback that I was getting was this high net worth individual was taking the time out of his day to actually speak with me. And he believed in the enthusiasm that I brought to the table. He kind of empowered me to go out and start to apply that. It may not have been a direct empowerment or comment that he made, but it was through that interaction that I started to approach my real life situations and circumstances with the same level of engagement and enthusiasm. And so fast forward from going to work and dealing with all that sort of stuff that's been going on, but I've been able to talk with my dad, and our relationship has benefited from having that spark of ambition. I should note, so the thing about Adam's energy and enthusiasm that he brings to what he does is it's contagious. Like, I haven't looked at a statistics textbook in over 6 years since I went to university. And I used to hate that class with an absolute passion. Like, I'm not a math guy. Like, I hate numbers. I hate equations and all that sort of stuff. And in dealing with Adam and his enthusiasm, it made me pull out of a box in my closet my old statistics textbook, and I started reading that in my spare time. Like, I used to think people that did that were insane. I thought there was something weird with them. And here I am in the real world talking about finance and investing and reading a statistics textbook for the fun of it, just because this guy has the same level of energy and enthusiasm. So it it was that spark that really started to kickstart my ambition and the enthusiasm to actually approach challenges. Like I used to shy away from risk and all that sort of stuff, but now I look at a situation. I look at like the working with my dad on the family business. I looked at that and I asked myself, does this fit my risk management tolerance as an investor of time and energy? So that's what I mean by the confidence that's built since I joined was it's actually because of the lesson material that I've started to really shift the way I have my perspective on the world and how I approach things. Is this an efficient use of my time and energy? Is this a productive use of my time and energy? What is the rate of return and the payout that I'm going to get? It goes beyond dollars and cents and crypto and Ethereum and blah, 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 blah. It's like, I look at it as I have a friend who lives a block away from me. This is a very close friend of mine who helped me get the job and the place that I'm staying at now. And I cannot talk him up enough. Like I don't have words to express the gratitude for that. But I look at that and I invest so much time and energy into that relationship because I know the payout of the fellowship and the brotherly love and acceptance and the accountability that he brings to the table is worth the investment of that time and energy. And I would make that investment over and over and over again. Same way I do with my discussions with Adam. Same way I look at work. I'm investing time for money. I'm investing time pursuing this educational pursuit for the payout of the information that I'll receive and what that information will do for me going forward. That's the kind of stuff that has really altered my perception of the world from stepping into the real world.
And again, something you hear often is you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And what you were saying about the statistics textbook, spending that time around Adam made you want to delve deeper into it. And even though before that you would have thought, wow, that's crazy. People really read statistics books. But there you go. And the friend that you were mentioning, is he in the real world by any chance as well?
He is. So this was actually a very important thing that I cannot stress enough about the real world is when you step into that community, you're stepping into a realm of men or individuals that, I don't know, we've had some women in there before that are doing their thing. But you're stepping into a community of people that have similar ambitions and similar perspectives. And it's very important to interact in the chats in a way that is positive, that is constructive, because you can then draw upon the energy that's in those chats and in this group as a source of motivation and inspiration. So when I referred the real world to my friend, I just said to him, like, listen, this is what this is about. This is the quality of information I'm getting. I showed him a breakdown of a post of Adam's investment analysis, and that made him pull out his credit card on the spot and join. Like the quality of information that Adam and Michael Sillard, that they all bring to the table. I speak about Adam specifically just because I have the most developed relationship with him, but Michael and Sillard, the rest of the professors, their expertise is beyond your expectations when you're stepping in. And so if by showing the information that we had in there made my friend immediately join on the spot, then we started to talk about it together. This is where the interesting dynamic shift happened, where we started meeting up and sitting down and we were discussing the information. Okay, what have you looked through? What have you learned? What are some of the things that are coming up that caught your eye? What do you have questions on? And we started digesting the information together. You get somebody in there with a similar motivation and ambition as you, and you can kind of develop that relationship of trust with them. My God, it brings a whole new dynamic to what the real world represents and offers. Is when you now have 2 different minds tackling the same problem and the same information, and you get that back and forth going, honestly, it increased the ability for me to learn and understand the material even further. And it's also nice to have a friendship where that is a central focal point of discussion for you. Is this is what I learned, this is what I took away, what did you learn? Okay, how can we apply this, and how can we go and make money with this? And it is one of the most satisfying feelings. Speaking personally as a man, it's one of the most satisfying feelings you can have as far as a discussion with one of your boys. Like, I get a lot of the stuff that's said about, nothing's better than hanging out with your boys, but when you're talking about how to make money and how to conquer the world with your boys, that's even better. So that's what I would say was an interesting dynamic that the real world brought to our friendship.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Now, let me know if you've already fully covered this, but I'd like to ask you, what was the biggest challenge you faced when first starting out in the real world? I remember you talked about greed. So if you have nothing more to say about that, that's fine. But if you can go more into depth, then do so.
Yeah. So for like before the real world, for years, I had never really encountered any very strong reactions or responses in that kind of vein. Like, I've never been a really angry person. I've never given myself into rage or just stupidity. I've always been very, very critical in my own thinking. Very, very self-aware of how I'm behaving, how I'm interacting, how I'm feeling, how I'm speaking, that sort of thing. That encounter was, I'm probably not going to forget that for the rest of my life, because it kind of showed me a side of what honestly a lot of people actually suffer from, just in the grand scheme of things. So I never really understood how or why people could be that greedy before, and that was probably just from some youthful innocence, naivete, not enough experience, that sort of thing. But after that point, I started to understand that better, and like, it was like looking into a mirror, right? Like, and I never expected to have this sort of encounter with myself when I stepped into the real world. But it was a very interesting experience, because I felt as though it gave me some perspective into what retail investors tend to do. Like the chimpanzees that throw their money at ape. Well, I'm not going to name any specific coins, but any sort of like shit coins that are out there. And they throw their money and they watch the green candle go up, and then they don't sell, and it all comes crashing down. It was a very ugly side that I encountered, and I can't remember if I shared it in the Wins channel or not way back when, but I remember Professor Michael commented on it. When I kind of shared that, I think it was a general chat, or I think it was a Win chat, where I talked about how I conquered that feeling of greed and stepped away from the exchange, reevaluated my position, reevaluated my emotional state. And it's like, I could have this was a defining point. This was a fork in the road. I could have delved even deeper into that pit of greed and lost the little money that I had. Like, I could have stepped into the point where I started gambling with my rent money. And when I forced myself to go through the lesson material again and started reading the comments and reevaluating my position, because this is what I had been told to do by the professors, is when you're emotionally trading, you need to step away from the computer. You turn it off, you go for a walk, you cook yourself a steak, you do some push-ups, and you come back to it with a fresh mind. And when I found that I did that, the feedback that Professor Michael gave me was very encouraging. Just to paraphrase it, what he told me was, you've identified a weak point, you've reevaluated your position, and now you're attacking that angle from a position of strength. That is one of the most important things you can do as an investor and a trader, is when you identify those issues, you reevaluate your position, you re-strengthen, you refortify, and you ask yourself not how do I not do this, but how can I ensure that I do better going forward? And that's kind of the takeaway that I took from Michael's feedback. So I would, that was the defining moment in the road. And I was pointed in the direction of the beneficial outcome because of the feedback and the overall community aspect of the real world. Like, and I don't mean to kind of over embellish that. That was a very real thing to me. I was disturbed by how I behaved that night for weeks afterwards. Like I stepped away from the charts for probably about, I want to say, 10 to 12 days. I didn't look at a chart. I didn't look at price candles. I didn't look at anything because I was so, I can't even think of the word right now. I was so spooked of what I saw in myself at that point, and I decided never again. That's never happening again. And so, yeah, with the encouragement that they had, I was able to reevaluate my position, go through the course material again, and I would like to think that I've turned out for the better because of that defining moment. And if I didn't have the influence or the encouragement from the professors in what they do, I could be a totally different person in a totally different situation. And I fully believe that 100%.
Mm-hmm. We can transition that into, what were the three biggest lessons you learned from your time in the real world?
The biggest lesson, that's okay. You're asking a good one. The first lesson that I learned, the first biggest lesson that I learned in the real world is that everything is an audition. You're put into proximity in a network and community with high net worth individuals. And you might think it's just the professors, but you don't know who's behind the screen and all the other student names and anybody else that's in there. You don't know who's sitting in the back row silently making tens of thousands of dollars and watching the interactions and observing the room. You don't know who's actually in there. So this is like the way I started to look at it was the real world is, this is your real test for and your real opportunity to build a reputation for who you want to be in the eyes of those who are there. And what I mean by that is, if you don't know who's watching, then assume everyone is watching. Doesn't matter what net worth they are, doesn't matter what importance or level of influence they are, everything is an audition. And that was lesson number one that I learned. So, and what kind of accentuated that was, in the beginning, I was a little bit more comical, humorous, laid back, sharing memes and all this sort of stuff. But there was a turning point where I had to step back and I looked at myself and I said, okay, hold on. These guys are trading millions of dollars. I don't know who they're connected with. I don't know who they are. I don't know who they know. Is this the person I want to be in their eyes? Do I want to be a memer? Do I want to be a shit poster? Do I want to be, some metaverse junkie that's just here to trade crypto? And I decided, no, I want to be something more than that. And that's actually what led me to start asking the questions and doing the tasks and helping out that got me to the point of being an apprentice. And that completely changed the game with regards to how I interact with the professors and the questions I ask and all that sort of stuff. So that was lesson number one. Lesson number two, obviously, is, as I've alluded to before, the way I see the world as an investor. The marketplace is a very brutal place. The marketplace just so happens to follow the same rules that the world does. Life isn't fair. Life is zero sum. There are a lot of situations you'll find yourself in where there is somebody that's going to be more ruthless and more aggressive than you are, and they will not hesitate to beat you down and take you for what you have. So when I took the example of the marketplace and I started applying that to the world, and so it was, the lesson that I learned there was, how can I better my position by investing my time and energy the same way I would want to invest my money into cryptocurrency, right? These are the assets that you have at the starting point. You have whatever little capital you have your time, you have your energy. how are you going to use those three in the most effective manner to develop yourself as quickly as possible? So that would be the second biggest lesson that I learned from the real world. And then number three was how to ask the right question. Questions are your tools for extracting the maximum amount of value out of the real world, out of your real life situations, out of friendships, out of relationships, out of work, like jobs, all that sort of stuff. Knowing how to ask a question is the difference between being stuck in McDonald's and then becoming a CEO of a company. Knowing how to ask the right question for a problem that comes up is the difference between acknowledging a problem and founding a company that can earn money to solve that problem. Those were the three lessons that I've really, I guess, solidified and confronted, understood, and solidified since I joined the real world. All this from the crypto campus, too, I should add. The other campuses, like the copy campus, the stocks, ecom, they all likely have their own hidden gems of lessons in between the lines for you to discover. I haven't even found them yet. This is all that I've extracted from the crypto campus in general. So there's a lot more to the real world than what you might expect at first. And if you step into it with the right mentality and the right headspace of everything's an audition, and this is like everything's an audition. That's the best foundational thing that you can keep in mind when you approach the real world, because you don't know who's watching. And let me tell you, they're watching. So.
And a lot of people come in wanting to make an impression, wanting to stand out in some way, but they do it in a negative way for themselves without realizing. One of the best ways you can actually stand out from the other students is by asking good, well-structured questions. I'm sure you would agree with that.
Well, there's actually so there's a movie that I really enjoy. My dad and I have watched this several times as I've grown up that kind of touches on that point. There's a very particular scene where there's these guys that are around a campfire, and most of them are speaking a different language. And there's one guy that stands out from the rest. And he, over the course of the time lapse and the scene of the movie, what he's doing is he's listening to their foreign language. And as they're bantering back and forth and they're sharing these stories and all that, he is able to eventually learn after a long enough time to understand and speak their language. And when he's confronted with the question, he looks at them and he says, I listened. So one of the most important ways that you can actually make an impression when you're stepping into this group is when you step in, you shut up for 5 seconds, you read what's going on. Only after you spend the time curating all of those things, the conversations, the way that the questions are asked, and that, you bring all those aspects together and then you ask an effective question. That's how you make the biggest impression. Is you come in, you listen, you learn, and then you engage.
I like it. Now, since you've been in the real world in Hustlers University for longer than most people have, what differences have you noticed between what Hustlers University was and what the real world is now?
The main differences that I see from before and after, well, it's difficult to say because like I kind of mentioned before, the baseline quality of information has been constant. I think the most interesting transformation has been the ways and methods that the real world has now developed to help engage with the young men that are in membership and that are students, to start improving not only their money making but also their personal lives. There's in the main campus, there is a challenge room that is holding young men accountable to cut out the negative influences in their life, like pornography or stuff like that. Like the level of support has only been increasing, like, and it's coming from a place of genuine care where, these professors, they want you to succeed. They won't do the work for you, but they want you to succeed, and they will help facilitate that with every possible method that is within their capabilities. And the same goes for the administration. The same goes for everyone involved. Everybody wants to help each other succeed because, in a world where it's just everything is so critical on what we do, what we think, what we feel as men. And I'm only speaking to the men, whoever else is in there. But when you have all of that pushback against what we as young men are wanting, just wanting to live productive and successful lives, and we're demonized for it, it's the level of genuine care is like, I feel like I can stand against the tide. You can have that wave of all this BS that's coming in from outside, but knowing that I actually have a community to fall back on and draw inspiration from and converse with, sure, bring on the tsunami wave. I don't give a shit. I can handle it because I know I'm not alone, and I know I've got other guys that are capable of handling the same thing. So that's kind of the transformation I've seen from the beginning to where we're at now. Is they started with the money making because that was their primary focus. They refined it and improved it to what we have now, and now it's expanded into all areas of life. Like this, the real world is truly about helping young men find success in all areas of life. That has been the most interesting transformation to see from the beginning, where I joined in, to where we're at now.
Mm-hmm. And now on a personal note, since you're on this trajectory, where do you see your life heading in 6 months to 1 year?
6 months. 6 months, I firmly believe I'll be able to quit my job and work with my dad full time. 6 months, I will be in a house that will be more personal to me. I won't be, I'll be more independent. I'll be more conscientious, and I'll be more strategic. And as far as the 6 month timeline is concerned, honestly, I'm not too sure. It's going to be a very interesting adventure that I'm embarking on. Because I have some personal pursuits and some networking pursuits that I'm stepping into, and I know that the end result is only going to be higher from where I'm at now. Failure is not an option.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I see my next 6 months.
Before we end off, what final message would you have to those who are considering joining the real world?
What I would say for somebody considering joining is give the campus or give the real world 3 months. The reason why I say 3 months is because in my personal experience, it took about 3 weeks to get over my biases. It took another 3 weeks to really delve into the information with an open mind. And then it's going to take some more time to apply the lessons into actual action. And if you don't feel like you've earned your money's worth, again, it's $50, and you're getting, you want to talk about university and you're learning from business professors that don't actually have millions of dollars that they manage, and you're paying thousands of dollars for the same amount of time. A typical university term is 3 to 4 months, and it costs, on average, the university I went to, it cost me $2,200 out of pocket. So what would you rather pay? $150 for 3 months worth of education and information curated by real world experience, or 22, 25, $4,000 for 4 months to be taught out of a textbook by people who are on salary and tenure and don't actually have the same level of passion? $150 for information that can then completely revamp your income structure it's the lowest risk investment you could ever look to make in yourself. So cut out the pizza orders for 3 nights out of 3 months and get into a campus, understand what it means to invest in yourself, because that's what this is. You want to talk about skill sets, you want to talk about everything that's going on out there. Well, the easiest way to invest in yourself is $50 to go into this group, see what it's all about. And if you're not willing to pay $50, then I'm not sure what to tell you in that case. But if you know something's wrong and there is a change that you know you need to make, this is the perfect catalyst to start that momentum, to start that movement and get you moving and rolling into a new direction that is going to be beneficial for you.
Great. And if people want to find out more about you or just want to contact you, where can they do so?
Well, my screen name in the real world is Ravoso. So if you want to know who I am, then my Instagram is whoisravoso. Plain and simple.
Nice. Well, Ravoso, Brandon, really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on. Really enjoyed this interview. And I look forward to doing a follow-up interview once you have more wins for us.
Well, those times are coming, my friends. I will be happy to share where I'm at in, well, likely 6 to 12 months.
Perfect. Wish you all the best and
Awesome.
goodbye.
Cheers, my friend. Thank you.